Hey, all right, we're here. Been waiting for this all day long. Had a lot of things going on today, but I'm here with you. I actually have changed the time back to. I've changed it back to about. We're going to do 7:30. So this is probably going to be the time that we are going to do the live stream. I know I moved it to 12 o'clock, 12:30, maybe thinking that was pretty good, but I think the evening time is going to be a lot better for people. Definitely will be a lot better for everyone who wants to listen in, I believe. So a lot of people are going to be off from work. But anyway, I love doing this. This is awesome. I want to make this pretty much an everyday thing for the month of June. I want to be able to come and bring you some great information just about the foods that we are consuming. For my Fruit for Your Life family, hey, appreciate you all being here and watching this a little later for those who come in later. Also from Processed to Pure Food Movement family, hey, thank you all so much for showing up and be here. And also Facebook family, appreciate you being here. Appreciate you showing up and going also for my private group as well. So we'll be sure to get that in. I can't wait to the day where they allow us to be able to start streaming again back in our private groups. They've kind of cut that out. But anyway, the reason why we're here tonight is we're going to talk about the role of sugar in our modern diets. Sweetened to death. I mean, that's basically what we are. We're sweetened to death. So you're going to see me doing hey, what's going on, vegan knowledge? You're going to see me looking around. So I've got like 3-4 different, once again, screens set up. So I'm just going to be having to look all over the place to make sure everything is running okay. But anyway, so this episode is going to be about sugar. You all understand how important sugar is in this society. If you want to start an issue or a question of sugar when it came about, we're going to also talk about the history of sugar. We're going to actually talk about a company, U.S. Sugar out of Florida. I was able to go down and I was able to experience their property. And I also was able to experience their factory. So I didn't get to go into their factory, but I was on the outskirts. I was on the towns right out. I could see the factory and I was at a town right there by Lake Okeechobee. And, just the smell of the sugar cane being processed through that town. It's amazing what all was going on down through there. So let's talk a little bit about the historical introduction of sugar, how sugar and when sugar became in. So sugar has a long, complex history. It was originally extracted from sugarcane in India as early as 600 BC. So sugar has been around a long time, just not at the level in which we have it. And later spread to Persia and the Mediterranean region. However, it wasn't until the 18th century that sugar became widely available to the general public in Europe and in America, thanks to the transatlantic slave trade, which facilitated large-scale production of sugar. Okay, so the transatlantic slave trade had a lot to do with the introduction, the spread, and the industrialization of sugar. All right, so you have countries like Haiti that produces sugar, Florida produces sugar, Michigan, Minnesota. All of these places are producers of sugar. So when you see these massive places, the amount of acreage that they take up, it's amazing to see how much sugar is actually being grown for America and countries outside of America to feed their habit. Okay, I'm gonna say it like that: to feed their habit, to feed their addiction. I mean, sugar it's actually in everything. So anyway, it facilitated a large-scale sugar production in the Caribbeans as well. So it wasn't just Haiti, it wasn't just the Caribbeans, it wasn't just Florida. It's a number of different places where we're getting the sugar. By the 19th century, sugar had become a common household item because of the industrial revolution. All right. So when the Industrial Revolution took place, you know, you're looking at around at the end of World War I, World War II. In that era, sugar became a huge thing. It was involved in a lot of different things. So making it affordable sweetener for the masses. So this was something that, you know, it was a pastime. Having sugar in everything was basically a pastime for people. It was a way to make it pleasurable for people to eat their foods. So then after the 19th century, after World War II, you had something else that came in. You got high fructose corn syrup began to come in and evolve, and actually kind of began to take over the sugar cane. So sugar is still, which is still important today. Now we have a more synthetic, even though it comes from corn, we have something that's a little bit more different. It's actually made in a lab. So fast forward to the 1970s when high fructose corn syrup was introduced as a cheaper alternative to cane sugar. Listen, these food corporations always want to produce something cheaper. Listen, when you make sugar cane, when you raise it, you have to plant it, you have to grow it, you have to cut it and harvest it, you have to process it. So there's a long process, a lot of money being involved in raising sugar cane. But if you can subsidize farms and say, hey, I will pay you certain amount of money if you will just grow corn only, don't grow anything else but corn. See, when you do that and you guarantee these farmers a certain pay because you know that that food that they're going to be producing, which remember, wheat, corn, soy, and also rice. Okay, so when they make these foods, they're making them not for us, they're making them for the food industry. So the food industry is the one that gets these particular products. That's why when you go down the highway, you're always going to see corn. You're always going to see wheat. You're always going to see soy. And in some states, you're going to see rice. I mean, when I was driving over the road, I saw rice all the time. It was amazing that you would see that. But those are the major crops that this country produces. You know what's amazing is that you can take these 4 crops and you could almost just about get rid of every other food group. You could almost get rid of every other food crop. And this country could almost run the whole food system off of processed food from those 4 crops. And that's amazing when they can do that. That's why you don't see acres upon acres of cabbage anymore. You don't see acres upon acres of spinach. Now, you're probably going to find that in California, places like that. That's where we get most of our stuff shipped from. But that's where you're going to find these particular things grown. But for the majority of the sake, when you drive, you're going to see corn, you're going to see wheat, you're going to see soy, those and rice. Those are the common food ingredients that make up ultra processed food. So high fructose corn syrup is derived from cornstarch and contains both. Listen to this. It contains both glucose and fructose. So you're not just getting one sugar, you're going to get fructose. But from corn, you're going to get glucose and fructose. I mean, that's amazing that they have been able to lab refine. Its introduction coincided with an alarming increase in the prevalence of obesity and type 2 diabetes in the United States. So just think about that. Diabetes and most of those diseases really picked up when high fructose corn syrup first came out in the 1970s. Okay, so now we see this big ramping up of diabetes. And that's because you're going to find sugar in everything, okay? Whether it's going to be the sugar cane or whether it's going to be high fructose corn syrup. That's what you're going to find, okay? So the health effects of excessive sugar and high fructose corn, you can probably guess what the health effects are going to be. But I'm going to read you this information. The health effects of excessive sugar and high fructose corn syrup consumption are profound. Both are linked to numerous chronic health issues, including obesity, type 2 diabetes, and heart disease. The high fructose content of high fructose in particular has been shown to cause metabolic problems and contribute to fatty liver disease. Now, high fructose corn syrup, it doesn't break down like sugar does, okay? So it breaks down a little bit differently. So sugar, cane sugar, can actually go into your system and then go into your bloodstream and then go into the cell. Unless you've had fat in your blood, then it's going to make it daggone near impossible for that sugar to get into your cells from coming from your blood, because the fat is blocking those receptors for that sugar to be able to go into those cells. All right, so you really got to be careful when we eat meat and when we eat sugar, because when you eat fatty meat, it's going to stop that absorption of that sugar from the cells. Okay, and that's where a lot of diabetes may actually come from, is because of our consumption. Think about when we grew up and what we were eating at home. It comes from our consumption. I had to have meat every meal. Growing up, I had meat every meal. And then always there was the big jug of Kool-Aid that was made with so much sugar in it. It was ridiculous. I mean, we used to, y'all know what I'm talking about, pour that sugar and then that packet of Kool-Aid mix, and we'd mix it up. And I'm telling you what, that was a sugar concoction. Man, you had to put like 10 cubes in there to dial that stuff back, to dial that sugar and that sweetness back. It was pretty amazing. Okay, so fructose is metabolized differently from glucose. While glucose is processed by almost every cell in the body, remember that, sugar goes directly into the cell. Fructose is primarily metabolized in the liver. High intake of fructose can lead to insulin resistance, increased fat production in the liver, and elevated blood triglycerides, all of which are risk factors for metabolic syndrome and cardiovascular disease. Listen, sugar, high fructose corn syrup, we eat so much of it in such large amounts that it is like ridiculous, and it is actually killing us. It is the cocaine. That's exactly what it is. Hey, what's going on, Nene? And what's up, Chuck? What's happening? Yeah, it's fake sugar. You should see that stuff. That stuff is so thick. When they produce it in the labs, I'm gonna pull you over, Chuck. It's so thick when they produce that stuff in the lab, it comes out like molasses, but it's made in a lab. That's where it's created. So we're going to have to start seeing the pink elephant in the room. Why would you give your health over to a lab making its contents? Why would we do that? Why are we so quick? And I've been saying this the last 3 days in every one of my lives. Why are we so quick to hand over our health to a food corporation that's only concerned about making profits? Has no care about our health. I can name corporations that the presidents, the CEOs was like, we've got to start producing better food for the people. And then what happens? Within several months, he's gone. I can name one right now. that did that. He was concerned about the health of the country, and he was going to alter the plans of the country, of his industrial company, to start meeting the health needs of the people. Guess what? The investors got him out. So you see what it's all about. It's really all about profits. It's not about our health. I say that all the time, but it's because I got to drive it home so that we understand what is going on. All right, the American Heart Association recommends limiting added sugars to no more than 6 teaspoons or 25 grams per day for women and 9 teaspoons or 36 grams per day for men. However, the average American consumes about 17 teaspoons of sugar, 71 grams of sugar or added sugar daily. So that far exceeds the guidelines. That's multiplied times what we're supposed to have. You know, that's not even including, you know, the sugar that we're eating from the foods, and we're not even reading the labels and looking at the sugar that's been added to it. If you really start looking at the sugar that's in our food, you'll see a lot of times that high fructose corn syrup, what they're going to do is when you read your labels, I'm gonna tell you how to read the label. I'm gonna show you the order of it. The labels are going to tell you the product that's in it the most. It's always going to be first. Then the next product, you know, the amount or the quantity that's in that food, that's going to be next. So it goes all the way down to the minimal amount that's in there. So most times you're always going to find high fructose corn syrup being the first on the labels. So start reading your labels, start looking at the carbohydrate or sugars. That's really what you want to look at, not necessarily carbohydrates. The sugar is what you want to see, how much sugar has been placed into the food. So when you look at things like vegetables and things like that, and they've added sugar in it, why are they adding sugar in it? Because they know we love sugar. And that's one of those things that we're going to have to be careful of while we're eating is our sugar intake. So many of us, if we're not watching our sugar intake now, you really need to grab hold of that and start watching your sugar intake. Because if you don't, so as I say all the time, people take issue with me talking about food addiction, okay? So if sugar is now comparative to cocaine, if you can be addicted to cocaine, why can't you be addicted to sugar? Sugar acts just like cocaine. It sets your dopamine off. There's actually, when you put it in a CAT scan or MRI, you're going to see the same process in the brain takes place whether you're eating, you consume some cocaine or whether you consume sugar. The same spot in the brain lights up. And after a while, that same spot in the brain begins to get smaller. And it's because of the excess sugar. The excess sugar. So it's like when you take cocaine. I've never had cocaine, so just let me say that. But it's like when you take cocaine, after a little while, it takes a little bit more. So I know this stuff from police work, from being studying drugs. You know, you need a little bit more in order to get that high. Everybody's looking for their first high. So it's the same way with sugar. You want a little bit more to get that dopamine. You want to get a little bit more to get that pleasure. All right, so now we see that we are actually overeating sugar. Most of us already know that we're already overeating sugar. So let's look at some strategies. I don't want to just produce the problem to you. Let's figure out some solutions to the problem. So strategies for reducing sugar intake. Reducing sugar intake involves both awareness and action. You have to be aware that you are overdoing it with the sugar. If you're drinking sodas, if you're drinking fruit juices, look, the stuff that we buy at the store, it's not fruit juice. It's sugar water with coloring and natural flavors. I'm going to give you a natural flavor. You want to know what a natural flavor is? Go look this up. Natural flavor is some raspberry is a natural flavor. Okay, but let me tell you what the natural flavor that they use. They may be getting away from it, but a natural flavor is the civet cat. Look it up. The civet cat is imitation raspberry. Okay, so they get raspberry flavoring from a cat. It's called the civet cat. And guess where they get that flavoring from? From in between its legs. They call it in the twain. Listen, I can't make this stuff up. So somebody in their crazy self has went and tasted in between the legs of a cat and said, that tastes like raspberry. Because that's what used to be used. It may not be used now. Maybe too many people have found out about it. But if you research that, you'll see, and I believe they also said the beaver. But if you look that information up, you're going to see that it's nasty what they're putting in our food. You know, some of the colorings that they put on candies comes from a beetle. The wax, they put wax on our candies, and it comes from a beetle. So look, they're causing you to eat products that come from, you know, insects and stuff like that. And putting it in our food, not telling you what it is. You have to go and deep dive to really find out what it is. So start by reading food labels and choosing products with lower added sugar content. Cooking at home with whole food. That's going to get rid of all of your concerns. If we will just go back to cooking at home with whole foods, most of the problems will be solved. Go back to cooking at home. See, we allow everybody else to cook for us. We allow the fast food companies to cook for us, the restaurants to cook for us. All these places, you don't know what's in their food. You don't know the people who are fixing their food. You don't know whether they're scratching in between. You have no idea what these people are doing to our food. And, you know, it's amazing. I actually have had friends who actually worked for food companies, and I can't tell you who they worked for because they had to sign disclosures. But they would help make the meat for these fast food companies, okay? They were making the meat patties for these companies. And they told me very little of it was meat. Very little. They were using charcoal. They was using this, that. Very little of it was meat. So these companies are finding a way to cheaply make hamburger patties with using very little beef. And then what does our bodies do with them? What do we do with them? What do we do with those chemicals? We don't even know what it is. And again, that's why I said we really trust these places making our food. Do you really think that they have our best interests at heart, or do they have our dollar at heart? I tell you what, I'm going to tend to believe that it's the dollar. Okay? So I want to tell you about my experience that I had when I was down in Florida. So when I was down in Florida, I was able to travel through Florida. You know, I always wondered why the people lived on the outskirts of Florida. And I understand that the Everglades are there. So you have to be careful with the Everglades. But they know how, they learn how to drain the swamps and the Everglades for people to be able to set up factories and grow crops and things like that on it. So I'm sure if they really wanted to, they really could probably build up the Everglades to where people could actually live there. But let me tell you what I saw when I went there. We were just driving around. We were getting close to Lake Okeechobee. So in South Florida, I'm going to go down to this way for you. So in South Florida, you see them living on the outskirts. So you have, you know, Dustin, you have, you know, Palm Beach, West Palm Beach, Fort Lauderdale, Miami, all on the outskirts of Florida. And then if you look at the other side, you're going to have places on the other side. You're going to have, of course, Tallahassee and all that, but you're going to come on down. You're going to run across Tampa and all those towns in that area. I believe Tampa is going to be almost as far south as you can go. There's one other town. I just can't recall the name of it. But in the middle of the state, we were driving in the middle of the state and we started running across sugarcane. And I was looking at my wife and I was like, man, what is that? I saw a sign that said U.S. Sugar. So we're going to these little bitty towns around Lake Okeechobee, and we're driving as far as you can see, nothing but sugarcane, going from one town to the next. And the U.S. Sugar employs almost all of these people who live in these towns. I mean, they literally, I have to say, they probably control all of these towns that live right there where the sugar canes are being grown. So I'm pretty sure that they are the one who uphold the economies, because there were some pretty poor communities that we went through. I didn't know Florida had those kind of communities in there till we drove through them. So we're seeing all these U.S. sugar, U.S. sugar, U.S. sugar signs. And then I started reading, I started hearing this. I want y'all to listen to this, okay? There is a podcast called Big Sugar. And this podcast begins to talk about like the U.S. Sugar Corporation and what they were doing down there. I'm going to give you some information on this so you can go listen to the podcast yourself. It's really amazing how they brought these immigrants in, Jamaicans, Caribbeans, all of these islander people. They were bringing them in and giving them visas. But we're going to talk about that. I don't want to take away from that because I'm going to read a little bit of information about that. So let's talk about the U.S. Sugar Corporation. And one of the signs that we saw down there said, serving the families in America. Yeah, they're serving us. It says the United States Sugar Corporation, U.S. Sugar, has a long and complex history, particularly concerning its land acquisition in Florida. I wondered, how did they get all of this land? No wonder everybody's living on the outskirts of Florida, because it's like they own everything in the center of Florida, all around Lake Okeechobee, the south of Lake Okeechobee. I mean, hundreds upon hundreds of acres. Just listen to this. Here, let's see, it says the founding in the early years in the history of U.S. Sugar Corporation. U.S. Sugar was founded in 1931 by Charles Stewart Mott, who envisioned transforming Florida's swampy Everglades into productive agricultural land. The company initially faced numerous challenges, including difficult agricultural conditions and the economic impact of the Great Depression. So in its growth and its expansion after World War II, U.S. Sugar expanded its operations significantly. Technological advancements in sugarcane cultivation and harvesting. See, this is where mechanization comes from. This is where they start to use machines to help with this, as well as federal price supports for sugar helped the company grow. The company invested in infrastructure, including the construction of sugar mills and refineries, which further boosted its capacity. So in the modern era, today, U.S. Sugar is one of the largest, agro businesses in the United States. So hear what that just said. One of the largest agro businesses in the United States. Why? Because we're all hooked on sugar. There's like 4 or 5 different sugar companies, and I think I'm going to give you a list of those here in a second. But they're one of the largest in the country. Man, so operating over 230,000 acres we drove through in the land of Florida. The company's holdings are primarily concentrated in the southern part of the state, particularly around Lake Okeechobee. Now, listen to this. I said to my wife, I said, why does it seem like U.S. Sugar owns most of the land in Florida. Like everybody is pushed to the coastal areas, and it's like really a big crowding down in that area. So everybody is pushed. Or when we fly out at nighttime, you can see all the lights are on the coastlines of Florida. And when you get over to the east, or you get over to the west coast of Florida, it's all, the lights are all along the west coast of Florida. And I'm like, but look, when you go south of Okeechobee, you don't really see anything. It's majority Everglades, but it's all owned by the sugar company. So now we try to figure out why they own so much land. Listen, land acquisition, the land ownership and controversies. The large-scale acquisition of land by U.S. Sugar has its roots in the early 20th century when the Everglades were being drained and developed for agriculture. Okay, so if they can drain the Everglades and develop the Everglades to make sugar, they can drain the Everglades and develop the Everglades for people to live in. Okay? It's packed down in Florida, y'all. When you go into the major cities down there, it's packed full of people. A beautiful area, don't get me wrong. But land is so expensive in Florida now. It's because they've been pushed and squashed into such a tight area to live in. Like, land is booming. I mean, the price of property is crazy. It's like 3 to 4 times higher in Florida to where I live right now. It's expensive. And it's because there is a great influx of people coming in. People who have online businesses and things like that. People who have money. They can come from California, New York. So they've got gobs of money to come and purchase property cash. And it's making it harder for people who live down there. It's like the Floridians now are getting pushed out of Florida. But they have so much property, so much land that's available, but it's owned by the sugar company. Large-scale acquisition of the land of U.S. Sugar has its roots in the early 20th century when the Everglades were being drained and developed for agriculture. The company purchased large tracts of lands that had been reclaimed from the wetlands. Over the decades, U.S. Sugar continued to acquire more land, pushing out the small farms. They were buying them up and they were pushing them out. And the farmers who were unable to compete with the corporation resources. So they basically were running these small farmers out of business. I mean, these small farmers, they were raising your produce. But now, no longer are they raising different varieties of produce. Now they're only raising sugar in this area to feed the economy of sugar, to feed the families of sugar in these companies. So the company's extensive land holdings and agricultural practices have been the subject of environmental and social controversies. Critics argue that U.S. Sugar's operations have contributed to pollution and the degradation of the Everglade ecosystem. In 2006, the state of Florida announced a plan to purchase 167,000 acres of land from U.S. Sugar. That's a lot of acres. You can put a lot of homes, you can let a lot of towns move into that area. But U.S. Sugar has it locked in. It's landlocked, basically. I don't know if y'all know what landlocking means. Landlocking means you have somebody who owns the property here, they got a way to get in. You got somebody who owns the property over here, they got a way to travel and have access, but the area in the middle, there's no access to it. So if the state of Florida wanted to make more towns and create more communities, they could actually go into that land that U.S. Sugar owns. They could actually make the property value in Florida go down and more accessible to people. More people could move into Florida and live there. And, you know, Florida's a great state. You can grow all kinds of foods there. But U.S. Sugar has it landlocked. They own it. So apparently, I guess the state of Florida can't just go and take what they want. So listen to this. This deal was intended to help restore natural water flows and improve the health of the Everglades. However, the deal was later scaled back to 26,800 acres due to financial constraints and legal challenges. Political influences. U.S. Sugar has been a significant political player in Florida, often involved in lobbying efforts to shape agricultural and environmental policies. The company's influence has been a point of contention, with critics alleging that it has used its political clout to secure favorable regulations and subsidies. So they're using their big people who are doing their lobbying to set up laws where they can get these big subsidies from the country. They can get these big subsidies from the U.S. government. They can also get it from the state of Florida. So they pretty much landlocked it. They own the property there. And now the state of Florida, in order to get some of that property back, they got to go through these legal battles to get some of it. But they only got a small amount of 167,000 acres. They were only able to get 27,000 roughly acres back. So it just shows you who actually owns it down there. I told my wife, I said, I feel like U.S. Sugar, they're the ones who owns it. So go check out a podcast called Big Sugar. Look that up, Big Sugar. It was a documentary that was done on sugar. If the title isn't Big Sugar, just look for sugar in the documentaries. It was done well by a news organization. You're going to find out, you're going to be able to listen to the people who worked on these sugar plantations, basically is what they were. You're going to be able to listen to the people and their stories and how they had to leave their families for 5 and 6 months at a time, and they would come back just wore out. And they would tell their families, I'm never going back there again. It was horrible. And then they lived in such destitute. It was the only way for them to be able to really take care of their family year round. So they would make enough money that they could support their family. But when the season came back around again for the sugars to be harvested again, guess what happened? They wound up going back because they had to have money for their family. So again, it's a pretty powerful tale of what is going on down there. So let me read something else to you. I know that there were a lot of Jamaicans that were transported and a lot of Jamaicans that were brought to Florida to do the working. See, number one, American folk, they wasn't going to deal with no sugar cane. They wasn't going to cut no sugars. Okay? So it's just like you have the Hispanics coming in today or the Mexicans coming in today and working a lot of farms because Americans aren't going to do it. So when we were in California, most of the big farms that we saw, they were actually being operated. The owners of them, were Americans, but the workers of them were migrants who came into the country, and they were coming into the country specifically for that. So with the sugar in, they were bringing migrants in, but they were bringing migrants in from the Caribbeans, from Jamaica, from the islands. So as you can see, the people of the Atlantic slave trade, those people were the descendants were the ones who were coming back and working the sugar cane again. Historically, U.S. Sugar Corporation, like many other sugar companies in Florida, has employed migrant workers from countries such as Jamaica to work in its sugarcane fields. This practice dates back to the early to mid 20th century when there was a shortage of domestic labor willing to work in that agricultural sector, particularly in the demanding job like harvesting sugarcane. These people who were harvesting sugarcane, they were cutting their hands off. I mean, people's arms were getting cut off. People were like missing the sugarcane and slicing their legs open. It was a very dangerous and hard job. They were forced to have so many picked at a certain time. See, a lot of these places, I mean, they were under guard. They had guys, it was almost like slavery. They had guys who would walk around with their rifles. I mean, this is in the 1930s, 40s, 50s, 60s. This was going on then. Just go listen to that podcast, Big Sugar, and it's gonna blow you away. It's gonna make you feel very sad the way these people were treated, harvesting sugar for us. Workers from Jamaica and other Caribbean countries were recruited through various programs, including the H-2A visa program, to fill these labor gaps. These workers often came to the United States on temporary contracts to work during the harvest season and then return to their home countries afterwards. So they weren't even being able to they weren't even allowed to come in and stay. They would come in, harvest, get the food for the American people, all the sugar they want, and then they were forced to go back home. Even for those who wanted to come to America to live, they couldn't do it. Their visa only gave them a certain amount of time, and then they were sent back to their homes. While the specific employment practices of U.S. Sugar Corporation regarding migrant workers would require more detailed research, it was well documented that sugar industry in Florida, like many agricultural industries across the United States, has relied on immigrant labor, including workers from Jamaica, to carry out essential tasks such as harvesting sugarcane. So they bought them over, they mistreated them. Number one, they mistreated them. They treated them harshly and crudely while they were here, while they were working. And after they picked their stuff, they kicked them out. So that's what the sugar industry has done, but it's to feed the addiction of sugar that this country has. Okay, so now this addiction is killing us. Again, with type 2 diabetes, liver issues, cardiovascular issues. It's killing us. We're eating way too much sugar. Our bodies do not require that amount of sugar. So if we're eating that amount of sugar, we're going to get fat. So if our bodies break down fat, it turns it into sugar to feed our cells. If we're introducing too much sugar into our system, well, guess what happens? It has to store that sugar that we're bringing in, and our body can't consume that much sugar. And then it makes our pancreas run wild. Why? Because we got so much sugar inside of our blood that our pancreas has to overwork itself in order to take care of that sugar that is in our blood. It's got to find a quick way to dump it. All right? So I hope this is some good information for you to, and really learning about the sugar corporations, how they did some not so good things, bringing in migrants to work. They call them migrants, but these people weren't migrating. These people were actually, lived in such destitute, it was almost like they were forced to come over here and work for these sugar plants. And, and again, I watched the mills. I was able to see the mill. So they heat this sugar up and the smoke just goes all over the town. It was like a nuisance to the towns that were there, but the towns were actually employed by the sugar mills. So what are they going to do? I mean, it was amazing driving through those neighborhoods. They looked destitute as well. These towns looked like they maybe could try to be built up, but they were so close to the sugar mills. I mean, they didn't have a large population, and the towns really wasn't growing. So anyway, that's who's got a lot of the property down in Florida. They're raising all that sugar to feed our overconsumption of sugar. They're feeding this country's addiction to sugar. And that's only a part of them. There's other ones. There's other sugar companies. Crystal was a sugar company. There's a Michigan sugar company. I think there's not an Idaho, Dakota. I didn't even know they grew sugar there. I mean, it's amazing to see where this sugar can grow. But so anyway, you're seeing where this addiction and how this addiction is actually being fed into the people. It's being placed in all processed food. All processed food has added sugar because they have to make it taste good. So if we'll start backing away from the processed food, start fixing our own food at home, we're going to solve a lot of these issues. But, you know, all you can do is hope that people will listen, hope that people will change their minds, change their life from processed to pure food. And that's what this movement is all about. I felt kind of weirded out going over some of this information. Actually, in our members club, you all are more than welcome to join it. I'll put the links in at the bottom of this. In our members club, the whole month lesson that I did, all of it goes back to ultra processed food. And some of this stuff was actually in the lessons that I had prepared. So if you want to get a deeper knowledge of ultra processed food, our members club, we're actually doing a deep dive in ultra processed food. We're looking at the history of ultra processed food. And we do that because we want to, in order for you to change your mindset, you got to understand what you're doing. You got to understand what you're eating. When you understand what you're eating and you understand what's in it, it makes you say, no, I'm not eating that stuff no more. It changes your whole mindset, your whole way of thought of processed food, and it begins to make you begin to gravitate towards the whole foods that we really should be eating. So again, if you're looking for a community to be a part of, from processed to pure food movement, members club is where you want to go. It is a monthly membership, but there you will get some great content that is zeroed in, more content. It goes deeper into this. What we're touching is we're doing a high assessment over the whole process. But the members club, definitely we're going into those deeper issues, because once you learn what it's made of and you learn the process of it and you learn why they did it and the introduction of it, you won't want to touch it. So anyway, hey, I hope this content is good for you. I hope you learn something about the Sugar Corporation. They don't produce sugar because they love you. They produce sugar because they want you to be addicted to it, and they want you to keep buying more of it, and they will keep growing more of it. But my fear is that it's getting ready to turn all chemical. So they're going to be using the high fructose corn syrup. It's going to be very hard to acquire cane sugar. Cane sugar is becoming very expensive now. So if you notice that buying sugar in the raw and all that, you get very few packets in those boxes, but the white powdered sugar or the pink, the yellow, the blue sugars, you get a lot in the boxes. So cane sugar is really getting ready to become, I don't want to say extinct, but they're going to start producing less of it because it's more economically effective to produce the corn syrup. Okay? So, hey, be careful of these things that you are putting into your body. Be careful of these things that you are ingesting. Your body does not like it. Your body does not know how to react to it. Your body actually wants nothing to do with it. You are the one who is putting it into your body. Your body's not asking you for that. But when we shove so much of it into our bodies start asking us for it. And therefore, that's where I believe the term addiction begins to take place, because your body begins to crave it. All right. So, hey, we're going to be doing more content like this. We'll be back tomorrow. We'll be back. Probably going to have to do a little bit earlier tomorrow if I'm going to do it just before sundown. Anyway, let me scroll through to see if I have any questions that maybe people are having. If you have a question, please post your question up, and I will definitely try to answer those questions. The way I just hollered, the cat with raspberry flavoring. Hey, I'm serious. Go look that up. It's called the Civet Cat. And that's how they made natural raspberry flavoring. Yeah. Okay, so I see there's no questions. Hey, it's been good. Thank you all for tuning in. I appreciate it. Hey, if you've got friends, family that you think that this would benefit, maybe help them in their understanding of ultra processed food, why we need to stay away from it. I'm going to be doing this every evening during the weekday, during the month of June, because I feel like this information is information that must be gotten out to people to cause them to want to leave ultra processed food alone. Hey, so again, I thank you all for joining. I will see you all tomorrow evening. I may actually do it more around 5 o'clock tomorrow, okay? 5 o'clock, because I need to do it before sundown comes in. So for those of you who want to come back and listen to tomorrow, what we're going to be talking about with ultra processed food, let's go ahead and time in at around 5 o'clock tomorrow, and I will bring you some more great information about processed food. All right. Hey, you all take care. Good seeing you all. All right. Let's fight to live. Let's eat that good food. All right. Bye-bye.